Welcome to Fleet News Group podcast. I'm Caroline Falls, and today I'm speaking with Samantha Johnson, Managing Director of the EV group Polestar Australia. I'm very excited to have Samantha on our podcast. As regular listeners know, I love talking and learning about the circular economy, and Polestar is standing out as a bit of a rock star in this area. I think when I heard they were using recycled fishing nets as a fabric in their high-spec vehicles, I was hooked on the brand. Welcome, Samantha.
Oh, thank you, Carolyn, and great introduction. And I'm really happy to be here and to be able to share more about what Polestar is doing towards sustainability.
Exactly. So firstly, I'd like to ask you to tell us about the company Polestar, like when it was formed and why, and in particular its vision and goals in relation to, the so-called Paris Agreement to cut emissions.
Yeah, so Polestar was originally a racing performance brand that was bought by the Volvo car group, and over time it became part of the performance arm of Volvo. You could buy a certain model and it would be Polestar engineered, certain engineering setup and software, what have you. But then it was realised it really needed to, it was different to Volvo. It needed to be broken out as its own brand. So not too many years ago, it was separated out under the Volvo car group and Geely group ownership. And now we are very separate brands to Volvo. So we have some of the same, manufacturing and some same systems, but really it's a very different engineering setup, very different design, the innovation and also the sustainability are all key pillars of Polestar, which really separates it as a brand. So we're a very different brand. And over recent years, the company has been very busy expanding around the world, including Australia. We started up a couple of years ago, towards the end of COVID, setting up the company and really getting all the infrastructure in place. And we started sales last year in February, so 2022. We now have nearly 2,000 cars on the road. But I think what I'm really proud of is the efforts that we have been making over the last 2 years in working with stakeholders and industry groups and government on what's really needed to drive more sustainable mobility for Australia. And that's from the supply, infrastructure and demand side, what's required to really, move things along at a faster rate than what they are today.
Yeah, I was just interested in sort of why Geely did separate Polestar out completely, and is Polestar only an EV vehicle manufacturer?
Yeah, well, I think when they were designing new vehicles, so our CEO of Polestar was the head of design for Volvo, and I think as they were designing these new cars, they realised that, this is not, it was a high performance car. It's actually the Polestar 1. That car wasn't Volvo. It was something different. It was more dynamic. It had a really a different feel to it. So that's why they decided to really break it out. And we do offer as brands, we are very different in our offering and what we stand for. So they started with the Polestar 1 was a hybrid, limited edition, sort of sports coupe, I guess, vehicle, but beautiful car, but only in left-hand drive. So it wasn't available in Australia, very limited edition. And what they've got in the market now is the Polestar 2, which is a fastback. So it looks like a sedan, but you've got the hatchback. You can put the seats down and fit all your, kite surfing and other equipment in the back. And we've got large SUVs, medium SUVs, and other cars coming up. But I think with our product range, and I guess again where we differentiate, we've had two very strong commitment cars for sustainability. That's a Polestar Precept and the Polestar Roadster, where we've really showcased the sustainability that you can bring into an exciting vehicle. And when you put sustainability into something that looks good, it performs so well, it gets people's attention, and that really influences others to come along this sustainability journey and do more than what they're doing.
Okay, so one of my questions was to ask you, how many Polestar EVs you've got on the road in Australia, and what, models and what's coming next.
Yeah, so the Polestar 2 is in market at the moment, and we sold 1,524, I think it was last year, 2022, and we've got more on the roads this year. So we're getting closer towards the 2,000 mark. And in January 2023, we will be having the Polestar 3, which is a large SUV, coming into the market. And then later on in 2024, we'll have the Polestar 4. So they're two SUVs, large and medium SUVs. And then we'll have the Grand Tour after that, 2025. And then we'll have the Polestar Roadster, which is that convertible. So very, very exciting to have these cars coming into the country. And it'll be a full suite of or family of products, but each model that comes out will have more and more sustainability built into it. So that's really important for us. And there's so much innovation happening in how we build cars and batteries, and the renewable energy being used, and materials. So it's an exciting space to be playing in, and we're really trying to do our part in being a more responsible auto manufacturer.
Yeah, as I said in the intro, I was captivated by your recycling of things like fishing nets for car mats and plastic bottles to make seating fabric. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the materials, the design, the concept, and how it fits in with circular economy principles. I was reading about aluminium and using virgin aluminium where you need to, but different grades of it where you can, things like that.
Yeah, that's right. And I think most of the vehicle sustainability is built was determined in the design phase. So when we look at our new vehicles that we're producing, we are using, we've had concept cars, the Roadster convertible, and also the Precept, which are now going to be, the Polestar 5 and Polestar 6. Those vehicles, we've used them as commitment cars to really show that we can use circularity, have circularity built into our cars with the aluminium that we are using, even in the Polestar 2 now. What we're using this year versus last year, there's 1.5 around about tonnes less of CO2 emissions, because we've used, there's more renewable energy is being used in manufacturing that aluminium, and more recycled aluminium is being used in that, which doesn't have, an additional footprint. So things like that. In our future products, we will have, natural products like flax being used instead of virgin plastics, recycled fishing nets in the mats, recycled cork, labelled aluminium and other parts. So when it comes to, repurposing or recycling at the end of life, it can easily be broken apart and known without having to sort of separate materials. In some of our future cars, we look at, single molded plastics where you don't have to break things down. It's just one mold. The aerodynamics of the vehicle, making sure that it's minimum air disruption and maximum aerodynamics, so that you're using less drag and therefore less energy when you're driving the vehicle. But there's quite a lot in there, and the battery technology is certainly improving over time. And we're also looking at end of life and what partners we're through Battery Stewardship Council and other partners as to, okay, we can build all this, sustainability and circularity into the vehicles, but what happens at the end of life here in Australia? How are we going to handle those products when they come back to be broken up and those components going into the right areas? So it's really important that we not only design the cars to be able to be, have more circularity built in, less scrap at the end, but we have to make sure that there are the organisations, the capabilities here in Australia and everywhere else in the world that can actually do the right things with those components at the end.
Wow, it's all very exciting and very new. And another thing that seems to be sort of popping up that I'm hearing a lot is collaboration. So it's as if, the real business of circularity that you need to collaborate rather than compete, to be open about challenges and changes needed to use the Earth's resources more responsibly. So I was just wondering if you could talk to me a bit about like this idea of collaborating more and more, and why it's important to help bring about decarbonisation.
Yeah, and probably maybe I'll give a sort of a bit of an overview of major project we're working on and what we stand for that goes down then deeper into that topic. So at Polestar, we have 4 pillars of sustainability. One is climate neutrality, transparency, circularity, and inclusion. So when we talk about climate neutrality, we actually have a project called Polestar Zero Project, and that's to build a climate neutral vehicle by 2030. We will be by 2040 a climate neutral organisation, but the starting point is this project, Polestar Zero Project. So that's where we've called out from partners all over the world to collaborate on this project because we don't know how to do it on our own. We need experts from around the world. It can be Australia, it can be anywhere. They can be consultants, engineers, university students, anyone from any walk of life who is involved that can really help us along this path towards this sustainable vehicle. Now that in doing that, we have to be transparent about where we are now. So we look at the Polestar 2 now, and we look at the life cycle assessment report, and we compare it against an equivalent ICE or internal combustion engine or petrol car. So when we do that and you use petrol off the grid or fuel off the grid, it has a lot less emissions than an equivalent. Polestar 2 has a lot less emissions than an equivalent petrol car. Now, if you use renewable energy in the Polestar 2, it has less than half of the emissions of an equivalent petrol engine. So buying an EV now and driving a Polestar 2 now is already a massive step forward to driving an equivalent petrol car. However, electrification is just the beginning. It's not enough. We have to make sure that we are taking emissions out of our whole supply chain from cradle to grave. So we have the commitment to a climate neutral vehicle 2030. We use the life cycle report now to look at to be transparent, and we provide that methodology publicly into the industry. So not only so others can see what we're doing and the methodology, but they can also use that methodology to measure their own products and where they are and what they need to work towards. Now, as we bring all these partners on board and how we're designing the current and future vehicles, we say, all right, circularity is absolutely, it's crucial that we design as much into the vehicles so that we are they're more the components and how we design the vehicle. They're more easily serviceable. You can get to components more easily, and they can be repaired, and so you're not scrapping things. So the car could be repaired more easily and serviced more easily. We look at if there was an accident, for example, and a car ended up in a dismantling yard. Instead of that car being scrapped, we look at all of the components and we say, right, what passes the quality test as a new part? And if it does pass that test, that goes back into the manufacturing line as a brand new component without creating a new carbon footprint. So we do that, and then if it doesn't pass that test, it goes into used parts workshops. So everything we're trying to repurpose, make sure it's serviceable, repairable. It goes back into the supply chain, and only if it doesn't fit into any of that will it then, after its useful life is finished, will it go into be scrapped, or recycled. So if we look at batteries as a really good example of this. When it comes to the end of the life for a vehicle, which is quite a long period of time, they're still good batteries, but they might not be sufficient for a car or have enough range left for a car to be using. But we might be repurposing those as battery units for your home, for your solar system, or they might be reused for other battery purposes, which are they're quite, they've got quite a much longer useful life for those other products, but just maybe not a car at that point. So making sure that we are repurposing, reusing these batteries. And only when it gets to an absolute stage do we then try and, break them apart to use in electronic components or other things, and then whatever is left over is scrapped. So again, designing the batteries to be able to be used as long as possible, and all components as long as possible, making sure we're repurposing, reusing as much as possible, so there's a lot less it gets to that end point to be recycled or scrapped.
So I hear you, everything that you said, and talking about Polestar getting its suppliers on board with you, and having a zero emissions production and vehicle by 2030. What about in Australia? What companies are in your value chain that you're working with? And from what you've said, they're having to commit to cut their emissions to work with you?
Well, we have global suppliers such as, there's quite a few there, but we've got new ones that have joined, like Vitasco, Stora Enso, and I think there's 6 other partners that have joined the project this year. So there's quite a few in there. But with these suppliers, we require them to be, using renewable energy, to be using sustainable, manufacturing or production of their components. So whether it's a service or whether it's a product or component, we require everyone who partners with Polestar to have, ethical and sustainable, sort of requirements that fit into our long-term objectives. So for us to be climate neutral by 2030 with this Project Zero, we need for all of our partners and all of our components, that whole supply chain, to be more sustainable. And we do use blockchain technology to source, risk minerals like cobalt, mica, and also, leather is a, it's an optional pack, but we use blockchain technology to make sure that it is actually a byproduct of meat, and that there's no animal cruelty, and quite a few other things requirements in there as well. So we're tracing those sort of riskier areas using blockchain, but we've got a lot of, there's thousands of components in a vehicle, so we try and have that supplier base as being as small as possible, so that we have greater control over our supply chain and their sustainability and ethical commitments as well, because one of our 4 pillars of sustainability is inclusion as well. And that means that, making sure that, that there's no, human rights abuses and animal welfare, any cruelty there, and making sure that in our supply chain that people are looked after.
I've got a couple more questions, but I've just become intensely curious about how you ended up in Polestar, or how you found your way there. I think you might have come out of Volvo, is that correct?
Yeah, well, I was originally I've worked overseas, but in Australia, I worked for Harley Davidson in 10 years. We took over the distributorship from independent dealership groups, and we built. I was there for about 10 years, starting in finance, and then moved across to look after the dealer network. From a performance perspective and profitability, and looking after sales as well. So that was great to be able to really understand all the areas of commerce within a dealership operation and our corporate operation, and that was from a marketing, technical, service operations, as well as the sales side. So the front to the back door of the dealership. So it was a great learning. And then I went to Volvo. I was there for 5 years, started as their CFO. I took on retail financial services, and then worked with the team on digital transformation and bringing the team member on board to really start that project. So there's definitely an interest in the full sort of commerce and e-commerce side of the business. And when Polestar came along, I was very interested in Polestar. I actually drove the original Polestars that had out here as part of the racing teams in Australia. And they were bright blue and they were noisy, and you put your foot down and they absolutely flew. They were the most exciting cars. So when Polestar has come back as these quiet, sustainable, sophisticated vehicles, I've just when I was given the opportunity to help them to get going, I jumped in there and did as much as I could. And then when the role came up to really bring the company to Australia in earnest, then I put my hand up, and I was very interested in doing it. And it's been 2.5 years now, and I've absolutely loved it. It's the most exciting company, and I really believe in everything that they're doing towards climate neutrality. They really are ahead of everyone else in the auto industry, and influencing others to come along on the journey. And there are some really good partnerships. Like we've just collaborated with Rivian on a pathway report, and really looking at the trajectory of where we're going at the moment from a temperature perspective. That 1.5 degree increase in temperature, that's anything over that is really becoming unsafe for humans. But our current trajectory is way above that. So there's different levers that need to be pulled, and you need different levers, such as having electric vehicles on the road, more sustainable vehicles. It's about using renewable energy, and it's about looking at your organisations and really reducing emissions from everything that we do. So if we pull one lever, it's not enough. 2 levers, it's not enough. But we really need to pull all the levers to make sure that we do not go over that 1.5 degree increment in temperature. And right now we are still heading way above that. And so there's a lot needs to be done in all different industries. But Polestar is part of the transport industry and passenger vehicles, and we are doing everything that we can to bring the emissions down to zero within our the cars that we're manufacturing, and also as an organisation ourselves longer term.
Just to clarify, so Rivian is the US EV utility and
Correct.
maker. And so what is the collaboration or partnership that you've got with Rivian?
It's a pathway report prepared. The report's been written by a consultancy firm, Kearney, and focused on sustainability. And it really so we're collaborating with Rivian on this report to really look at the study of what the trajectory is at the moment on our emissions that the industry and everyone is creating, and it's not improving. It's not it's increasing the emissions, not decreasing at this point in time. So, and it's not enough for ourselves on our own or even Rivian to be going on that journey. It needs the whole industry to come on that journey, to have electric vehicles on the road, and beyond that, reducing emissions totally from the manufacturing. And if we all do that, then we can bring those we can all be carbon neutral. That's going to greatly bring those emissions down. But it can't be 1 or 2 companies. It needs to be the whole industry.
Okay, so I'll have to get my hands on that so-called pathway report. But meanwhile, Polestar puts out its own sustainability sort of like report, and I was just wondering if that's an annual update or when the next one's due. Do you know if you're on track to meet your goals?
Yes, so that's our life cycle assessment report, and currently it's on the Polestar 2, and we will be creating one on the Polestar 3, which is our next vehicle coming to Australia. And that on an annual basis tells us where we are, and we know where we're going to, and we know what that timeline is. So, and we have partners on board and more coming on board each year. We have timelines and requirements that need to be in place each year, and it's about the partnerships, it's about the supply chain, it's about the components, about how we design the vehicles. And that's where it's been really, really important to have the Precept, which is our first commitment car towards sustainability, and that really showcased the use of flax and recycled PET bottles in the seat casings and recycled fishing nets and recycled corks, and it sort of showcased some of those sustainability efforts. Then when you move, so that Precept is now going to be the Polestar 5 in production. Then you have the Polestar Roadster concept for sustainability, and it actually toured around Australia November last year. And really we're showing people, what that looks like. And that's really going to that next level of sustainability where we are, labelling the aluminium, and where, we've got more natural products that we're using and different ways of moulding and more sustainability built in. So we're showcasing these concept and commitment cars to show that, we know what we need to be doing, but it's a matter of, getting the suppliers on board and making sure they can deliver on what we need to do, and that we keep to those timelines and those targets, and importantly, influence others to come along the journey as well.
And so if we want to see a Polestar, which of course we all want to see now after talking to you, where do we go?
So we have our beautiful flagship location. It's called A Space in Chadstone Shopping Centre in Melbourne. That just opened in December, and it's had the highest footfall of any Polestar space in the whole of Australia. So it's been very, very successful. And what that really does is, there are people who want to test drive or have a look at a Polestar. They can come in, but also people who are going past that hadn't even thought about electric vehicles yet, or they're not there on that journey yet. They can just be going past and like, oh, I'm just going past. I'm just going to ask them. I'm just going to go. And we're very welcoming. They can just go in there and ask me, what does it take to own an EV? Where do I get my charging from? And what does it cost? And how do I do this and that? And so we're just there to answer all of those questions. So that's been really, really helpful. So that's Chadstone. We've got a test drive and handover centre in Port Melbourne as well. Sydney, we have a test drive and handover centre in Alexandria. Brisbane, we've got the same test drive and handover hub in Bowen Hills in Brisbane. And we also have Hobart, and in Perth we have test drive and handover operations there. And in Canberra and Adelaide we have test drive and handover activations. We've actually got one in Adelaide that's underway now for the next week or so, in line with the Adelaide Festival that's on during that same time.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time today, Samantha. It was really a thrill to talk with you.
Oh, thank you, Carolyn. It's great to take part. Hopefully it's provided some good information for those out there thinking of buying an EV, or just really trying to understand that sustainable journey and what Polestar is doing towards that becoming climate neutral.
You've been listening to Fleet News Group podcast. It was edited and produced by Isabella Fiorentino. You can follow us on Spotify. Just search for Fleet News Group. We're also on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. Our website is fleetnewsgroup.com, where you can get all of our stories, videos and podcasts. Until next time, drive safely and take care.